Board of Mayor and Alderman. Thank you. Good evening. We're going to call the work session for the Board of Mayor and Alderman to get to order. This is April 25th, 2023. We're going to call the roll first. Vice Mayor Barnhill.
Here.
Alderman Blatton, she's absent. Alderman Hanson.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Present.
Alderman Brown.
Present.
Alderman Potts.
Present.
Alderman Baggett.
Present.
And the mayor is here also. Next thing on the agenda is an opportunity for citizens to make comments for items not on the agenda. I have one speaker card for those that are new. We fill out speaker cards if you're going to speak. Otherwise, hold your peace, I guess. Paul, come on up. I'll give you a couple of minutes.
Thank you. I'm Paul Lebovitz. I live at 102 Winslow Road. It's the corner of Franklin Road and Liberty Pike. And our household is the unofficial inspector for the Franklin Road project. I can tell you how much bricks laid every day, and you just give me a call. I'd like to make some comments about the Middle Lake project. I was flabbergasted to see Kaiser Vogren Design proposing the adjustment of Envision and other codes to suit the needs of the Middle Lake development. Kaiser Vogren has tried this on other properties such as the corner of Mac Hatcher and Franklin Road. I was startled that they chose all Zoom public hearings, but that is how you avoid confrontation and the free flow of neighborhood feedback. I suggest that another public hearing be held with invitations going to all residents within 1,000 feet, because that will cover all of Miles Manor, Daniels Drive, and Lancaster. And I'll guarantee you all these citizens are concerned. I trust the planning commissioners as well as aldermen have read the Kaiser Vogren 15-page dialogue posted on the city website. Actually, I was impressed they could write so long. Their project justification argues for more height to satisfy the future need for housing. In the dialogue, Kaiser Vogren stated the prime motivation of the development is to meet housing demand. Well, we have plenty of $500,000 and up homes and $2,000 a month apartments. They're built, plus we have more on the books. I think the Kaiser Vogren logic is flawed, as the type of housing they propose will be out of reach of anyone with less than $70,000 salary. Pretty much workforce housing and below will not live in these units. It's ironic that they stated they have a building with a concierge desk, and in the same paragraph they talk about affordable smaller units. And the buildings appear to be rental. I couldn't see that their condos are going to be sold, and we've just got a lot of rental already, and I think we know that. The dialogue celebrates hundreds of people working on the site for several years and the incomes that are produced, but we know from the unfinished streetscape that the workers there don't live in Williamson County. Their spendable salaries and taxes go elsewhere. The dialogue attempts to justify buildings taller than Jamison Station, but neither I nor any of the neighbors approve of the idea. If we allow 5- and 6-story buildings in the downtown area, we might as well give up the hilltop protection ordinance. 5 and 6 stories are going to destroy also the look of the factory water tower, our local landmark. No one wants a tower over their backyards and bedrooms, which is what could occur for those that live on Daniels Drive in that area. It's called privacy. My last comment is the project needs required parking spaces. Kaiser Vogren is asking that because they have underground parking, they get to reduce the required number. And I think that they need to be held to accountable for any unit they produce. They meet our standard for parking. We already have some limited space. We already are sort of short on spaces around Jamison Station, and I know you'll hear from residents that say we'll enforce that idea. I thank you for letting me come up here today.
Thank you. Okay, next item is the long-awaited presentation of the 2022 Franklin Citizen Survey results.
All right, well, it has been long awaited. Michael has shown his patience, and we're excited to share this with you. We measure a lot of things about how we deliver services, response times, quality of service, the timing it takes us to do certain things, but we also want to measure and assess the perception of our citizens, the people we serve, and what they want to see in their community. So this is something we've been doing since 2012 on a regular basis. Around 2 to 3 years, we go out and ask our citizens how we're doing. that takes a lot of different shapes and different areas. And so this is what we want to reflect on with you tonight, is the survey that was completed at the end of 2022 and what we heard back from our citizens. So Michael's going to walk us through that. I'll probably chime in on a couple things, and we're glad to get your feedback and any questions you have as we walk through the results and what we heard from our citizens. Michael?
Thank you, Eric. Because you knew you had to wait just a little bit longer.
It's in the bad omen. It's not going to happen. is
You
it?
know, it really. Let's see. There we go. Even technology wanted to delay this another 30 seconds. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. My name is Michael Walters Young. I serve as your Budget and Strategic Innovation Manager and staff lead for the Franklin Citizens Survey. Tonight, we will discuss the methodology of the survey, how it was conducted, and then spend a little bit of time talking about the results in a variety of overall areas and then community-wide facets. And then we'll focus some time on survey comparables to ourselves. There are several questions which are embedded as part of your strategic plan that we ask as part of the survey, and then compare our previous answers in 2016 and 2019, as well as some from 2012, and then finally look at how we stack up against cities nationwide that utilize this tool and custom benchmarks. So this survey was conducted in two separate ways. There was a randomly selected group of residents, 2,800 to be exact, in a closed control group that our vendor, Polco, and the National Research Center, surveyed. And then there was also time for an open web-based survey. The survey started on October 24th, 2012, with those 2,800 mailings going out to pre-selected homes. The first mailing received was a postcard saying that the survey was coming. The second mailing contained a letter from the mayor and city administrator inviting the household to participate, a questionnaire, and a postage-paid returned envelope. Now, they could either fill it out in paper and mail it back, or certainly there was a link and they could be able to access it and do it online. And then there was a reminder postcard at the end. Completed surveys were collected and accounted for over the following 8 weeks. About 4% of the 2,800 postcards came back to City Hall, returned as undeliverable, and so 2,700 households were actually surveyed. Of those, 448 completed the survey for an overall response rate of 17%. Now, it's of note, this is the lowest response rate we've had since we've used this particular instrument. We had 37% in 2016, and we had 29% in 2019. The national average is around 26%. In addition, as I mentioned, we opened it up to anyone who wished to utilize the survey online from November 28th, 2022 into early December. 217 surveys were received, and that also was a lower amount for the all-comers survey than 2019. All of the results that I will be discussing tonight are from that control group, the ones that got the postcards. But you have the information in your more detailed packets of all the open-ended responses from the online survey. That's a separate part of your survey results, as well as 14 pages of the open-ended responses, and we'll get to those in a little while. So this tool, the National Community Survey, is designed to measure our livability. Our vendor defines that as the sum of factors that add up to a community's quality of life. Now, we utilize Polco and NRC because this is pretty much all they do. They have a standardized survey tool that asks the same questions to the same cities who use it, time in and time out. So you truly can benchmark yourself against yourselves and other cities. In their research of communities, they've come up with 10 central facets of a community. You can see those on the screen, both in the graphic as well as the bullet points. Those 10 are economy, mobility, community design, utilities, safety, natural environment, parks and recreation, health and wellness, education, arts and culture, and inclusivity and engagement. Page 6 of your survey has these 4 key takeaways. First, Citizens of Franklin appreciate the many aspects of city leadership and governance. Of note, 8 out of 10 found appreciative and found positive results for customer service and the quality of services provided by the city. 7 of 10 rated positively the value of taxes paid for what they got. And 2/3 of survey respondents believe that government was acting in their best interests. Second, many aspects of the Franklin's community design receive positive reviews, but there are some areas and opportunities of concern. Citizens love living in their neighborhoods in Franklin. They love the feeling of safety they have in them. They love how they're designed. And they love how friendly they are. I mean, you'll see this time and again through the survey just how friendly and neighborly we are. However, what draws this metric down is certainly, and this also comes up time and again, a lack of availability and variety of affordable housing within our community. Third, Franklin's economy is strong, but it poses challenges to community livability. Specifically, there is a question which we'll look at in a second regarding how do you think the economy is going to affect you in the next 6 months? And finally, Franklin's educational, cultural opportunities are a valued aspect of community livability, leading to a high quality of life. Access to our events, celebrations, religious and spiritual activities certainly rank very high. So there are 2 facets overall that come out of this. One is quality of life, and the other focus is governance, before we get into those 10 individual facets that I mentioned a moment ago. First, quality of life. Virtually all residents rated positive the quality of life they have in Franklin, Tennessee. 97% combined rated it excellent or good. In 2019, this was 97%. In 2016, this was 97%. So there's a consistent degree here that no matter what else has happened, literally in our community, in our world over the last 3 years, the quality of life for Franklin residents still, they rank incredibly highly. This is higher than most other cities. And in fact, if you look at it nationally, we would rank 7th in the nation for quality of life. Governance, over 2/3 of respondents rated confidence in Franklin government as excellent or good. This is down from 2019, where it was at 75%. It is higher than national benchmarks, however. And the city also ranked higher in overall customer service provided by city employees, 89% positive. That's certainly something that we take great pride in seeing as a response. Positive for the value of services for taxes paid, the job that Franklin's government does at welcoming resident involvement, and generally acting in the best interests of the community, though all of those measures are slightly lower than they were 2.5 years ago. So let's shift to the individual facets. The first is economy. And as I mentioned, the perception of Franklin's overall strength from the economic standpoint remains very strong. Survey respondents rank us as 5th in the nation as a positive place to work, highly as a place to visit, 5th nationally for the variety of business and service establishments that they can access in the city, 2nd nationally in the vibrancy of their downtown and commercial area, and 2nd nationally in terms of ability to access employment or employment opportunities. The draw on this metric, however, is that question you see in the right. And survey respondents were asked, what impact, if any, do you think the economy will have in your family in the next 6 months? Only 20% rated positive. 4% very, 16% somewhat positive. 40% said neutral. The other 40% was somewhat or very negative. So, not surprisingly, we've talked about this in our Budget and Finance Committee meetings. Inflation is on the mind, and continued economic questions are certainly in the minds of our citizens, just like they are everyone in the room. The second facet is mobility. 2/3 of respondents rated the overall quality of the transportation system in Franklin as excellent or good. Ratings on mobility, with the exception of ease of travel by bicycle and public transportation usage, are similar to other cities. Those two I just mentioned are significantly lower than our comparable benchmarks. However, we are above national benchmarks when it comes to street cleaning and sidewalk maintenance. I'm sure Steve Grubb is somewhere in this room and is puffing up his chest just a little bit proudly. Third facet is community design. Nearly 3/4, or 74% of respondents, rated the overall design or layout of commercial areas and residential areas as excellent or good. This is down from 2019, where it was at 80%. Respondents still rate their neighborhood. Yes, ma'am.
Put your green button on, please.
It looks like on the top one there where it says quality of transportation, excellent and good, looks only to 47% instead of 69%.
In that particular graphic, you are correct. The question that was asked ties back to the 69%. I will get you an answer. When looking at transportation, I will say this is a complicated one only insofar as what we have seen, and we'll see it when we get to some of the other facets of transportation in Franklin. You see respondents rating the difficulty they have in getting around actually going down. That the percent of individuals that rate it poor has actually been decreasing since 2016. But when you look at sort of travel by car, it's much better than it would be certainly travel by bicycle or walking, sort of other intermodal forms. But we'll take a look at that more in depth. On community design, the respondents still rate their neighborhoods as an excellent place to live. 93% rated positive, excellent or good, as well as the overall appearance of the community. That puts us 7th nationally in terms of overall appearance and cleanliness. The 4th facet of utilities, over 3/4 of respondents rated the overall quality of the utility infrastructure as excellent or good. This is similar to other cities. Utility services that rated higher than national benchmarks included access to affordable high-speed internet, the power utility, and utility billing. Please note, the question of power utility was asked several weeks before Christmas. That maybe have been a different answer if the survey had been asked at that point. May not, but you know. 5th facet of safety. This is one where we have always rated very highly on, and we're very proud to say that we have again. 94 to 95% of respondents rated their overall feeling of safety as excellent or good in the city of Franklin. Feeling safety or feeling safe in your neighborhoods or in the downtown was actually even higher. 99% rated that as excellent or good during the day. No provision of public safety services, whether that be fire response, police services, crime prevention, emergency management, rated below 84% positive in this survey. Next facet is natural environment. Over 8 in 10 respondents rated the overall quality of the natural environment as excellent or good, 83%. Of note, Franklin's cleanliness was rated higher than national benchmarks. Parks and recreation, 9 out of 10 rated the overall quality of parks and recreational opportunities as excellent or good. That is comparable to national benchmarks. The facet of health and wellness. One of the things to keep in mind as we look at through this survey is that this, of course, was the first survey that we issued post-2020 and all of the events that occurred and the pandemic. 84% of respondents rated the overall health and wellness opportunities of the city of Franklin as excellent or good. That is higher quality of life ratings than seen in other cities. The availability of preventive health services and the quality of those services in Franklin were also rated higher. Of note, though similar to national benchmarks, is a marked drop in the positive ratings for the availability of affordable quality mental health care. 67%, or 2 out of every 3, rated it as positive in 2019, compared to only 1 out of 2, or 51%, in 2022. That's a point that was talked about at Frank Talks when we presented, and one of the points that either Eric or the mayor raised was it's important that we live in a different world now, and people may be far more conscious of accessing those services and looking for them than they may have been in 2019. I don't know if Mr. Mayor, you wanted to make any further comments on that particular point.
Sure, I'm glad to say a few comments. As you know, we've been working on mental health in our community and raising awareness of mental health. And also you've seen a lot more press from professional athletes talking about mental health. And so I think that's really caused an uptick in people being aware. So I'm not surprised that it's down some. That's good. And it is true that there are long waiting lines for counseling. To find a psychiatrist is nearly impossible. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area.
Two more facets, and then we'll move on to our special questions. The facet of education, arts, and culture, 83% of respondents rated the overall opportunities for education, culture, and the arts as positive. That is higher than quality of life and education access in other cities. Higher than national benchmarks as well were the opportunities to attend cultural, arts, and music activities, our community support for the arts, K through 12 education, and opportunities to attend special events and festivals. The final facet examined is inclusivity and engagement. 3 out of every 4 respondents rated their connection and engagement with the city of Franklin as positive. Franklin remained very strong in its respondents' belief that the city is one of the best places in America to raise a child. 96% rated it as positive, excellent, or good, and that would put us at 7th in the nation. Respondents also rated Franklin higher than benchmarks as a place to retire, for its sense of community, its sense of civic pride, for the neighborliness of residents, I mentioned that a few minutes ago, and for opportunities to participate in social events and activities and to volunteer and to participate in community matters. So then we ask several specific questions that are not benchmarkable because they're only questions that we ask either for our strategic plan purposes or to gauge citizen input. The first one that we ask is, and we've asked this for every year, the 3 surveys that we've used this tool from 2016 onward, please rate your level of satisfaction with the City of Franklin's management of growth. In 2022, 76% rated their satisfaction of management of growth as either very or somewhat satisfied. This is lower than it was in 2016 at 84% and lower than it was in 2019 at 80%. Our benchmark or goal here is that 80% are satisfied with the management of growth. Although it's a positive response, it is clearly on people's minds. We'll examine this data in a moment. 31% of citizens used their opportunity to say whatever they wanted to say in the open-ended responses to mention managed growth, development, and crowding. It is the most frequent written response. It's also important when you look at the data to note that the amount of people that are very dissatisfied has not changed since 2019. 7% were very dissatisfied in 2019. 7% are still very dissatisfied with the management of growth in 2022. You will see when we look at a couple of these other comparables that it has been sort of the edges that have grown, either very strong satisfaction or dissatisfaction, and sort of the more neutral, fair to somewhat satisfied in the series of questions, whether it be growth or taxes paid, have sort of shrunk when you look at the pies. The second non-standard question we asked was, please rate how important, if at all, you think it is for the city to enhance each of the following services or amenities. And respondents were given 5 choices: regional transit, affordable and workforce housing, greenway connectivity, retail and entertainment options, and public art. Affordable and workforce housing was the largest, with a combined essential or very important of 73%. Regional transit and greenway connectivity tied for second, with those ranking it essential or very important at 61%. Retail and entertainment options at 52%. And the least interested category in terms of respondents for enhancing these services was public art at 35%. Finally, our open-ended question. We have asked the same question for the last 3 surveys, and that is, aside from transportation and traffic issues, What is the most important challenge or problem facing Franklin today? You can see on the screen 31% said managed growth and development, 22% affordable housing, 11% still said traffic, transportation, infrastructure, and roads. That's been consistent that 1 out of every 10 still says traffic. And 10% cost of living and affordability. You take those top 4 responses together, you get nearly 75% of all individuals who answered the open-ended question. So you have a pretty clear idea what are the most important issues people are facing.
So I think it's important on that one, and you'll see it in the next slide as well. When you bring that affordable housing at 22% and then the cost of living affordability, when you put those together, because those kind of seem to me to be sort of the different sides of the same coin discussion, that's 32%. So that's right there with the managed growth component. And that's grown pretty significantly in the comments that we see just looking back 3 years and then the 6 years before that. So that has grown as a concern amongst our citizens for sure.
Another way to look at this is a word cloud. Because you can do quantifiable data like we just did, or you can see it. And you can see that the largest words, of course, a word cloud is obviously a frequency measure, if you will, of how many times a word is mentioned. So housing is the largest. It was mentioned most frequently. Franklin second. That's understandable. Followed by growth, affordable, infrastructure, city, and then people. There is no method to the color scheme, FYI. There's no positive or negative dependent. Apparently, Easter pastel was on my mind when I built the word cloud. But it shows you, certainly, that these are the top 50 words that were mentioned. And, with what we've talked about in the data, it all seems to look and tie together. Affordability and neighborhoods and developments and downtown and what have you. So let me shift to survey comparables. We have, as Eric said, we did our first survey in 2012, and then we followed up with the same survey tool in 2016, 2019, and 2022. And what we like to be able to do is focus on questions that were either exactly or very similarly asked between each of those surveys to see how we're doing over time. The first one is, how would you describe the overall quality of life in the city? And as I mentioned, that's been a consistent 97% since 2016, higher than it was in 2012. Are things in Franklin moving the right direction? In 2012, 82% responded positively. In 2016, 73%. In 2019, 75%. And in 2022, only 2 out of 3, or 66%. How would you rate the job being done or the quality of services provided by the city government? 2012, 83%, 2016, 89%, 2019, 93%, and in 2022, 82%. And finally, as a direct juxtaposition, the way it's asked on the survey, it literally is the next question. How would you rate the job being done or the quality of services provided by the federal government? We did not ask this question in 2012, but it has been asked since. 44% rated it positive in 2016, 53% in 2019, and 37% in 2022. So in life, there are 2 things which you can't get rid of and are resolute. They all are going to happen. They are death and taxes. So we ask a question about taxes. The 2012 survey asked it in a particular way, and it said, for the services you receive, would you say that the property taxes in Franklin are too high, just about right, or too low? And you can see on the screen, 20% rated too high, 69% about right, 5% said too low, and 6% did not have the attitude regarding their taxes paid in 2012. Since we've gone to this survey tool, the question is asked, please rate the following categories of Franklin government performance, and that is just the value of services to the amount of taxes you pay. 76% rated it positive, excellent, or good in 2016, 76% again in 2019, and 72% in 2022. The pie charts here illustrate what I was saying a few minutes ago regarding questions of management of growth. that individuals who felt that you get a poor value of services paid has increased from 2019 to 2022 from 4 to 7%. But there's a steady growth of the people that think it's excellent, the amount of value they get for the services paid. 23% in 2016, 26% in 2019, 30% in 2022. It is those that rate it simply good that is seeing the decline, if you will. The next two slides are going to show you the far extremes. So those survey comparables where Franklin residents rate the following issues as excellent in their community. So not just positive, but excellent. We rank very high in neighborliness, as I mentioned. More than 1 out of every 3, 36% rank the level of neighborliness in the Franklin community as excellent. 46% rate as excellent economic opportunity and jobs. You can really see how that one has taken off in the last 10 years. 8% rated it positive in 2012, 19 and 16, 37% in 2019, 46% in 2022. And shopping, people like their shopping opportunities in Franklin. Now, it did go down, but it was from a high of 58%, more than 1 out of every 2 rated it excellent, and went back to 50%, matching 2016 levels. There are those areas, though, that we rank poor on. Cost of living has gone from 15% rating it poor 10 years ago to 29% poor in 2022. Affordable housing has seen that level of increase similar to the jobs on the excellent side, from 11% poor in 2012 to 35% poor in 2016 to 42% poor in 2019 to 58% poor in 2022. Transportation and traffic has actually gotten somewhat better. It peaked at 29% rating it poor in 2016, and it's down to 22% poor in 2022. And finally, level of diversity, 8% rated at poor in 2012. That is up to 1 out of every 4, or 25% of survey respondents in 2022. So the last section of information I have to present for you this evening is, how do we stack up? How are our comparables? Rather than comparing against ourselves, how do we compare to other communities? There are 2 sets of data which I will show you. The first is, how do we compare nationally to all 600 survey responses? And then the second set is a more narrow set of comparables, just those communities of our population size, which is 50 to 100,000. You can see on the screen that we rank very highly. In fact, these next 2 screens are going to show you top 10 rankings nationally. We rank second in the nation for the vibrancy of the downtown area, the overall quality of our business and service establishments, employment opportunities, and the opportunities to participate in religious or spiritual events and activities. Third nationally in economic development and our efforts in preservation of the historic and cultural character of our community. Fourth nationally in sense of civic and community pride. Fifth is a place to work, the variety of our business establishments, and the neighborliness of our residents. Sixth in overall image or reputation. Seventh in overall quality of life, sense of community, place to raise a child, opportunities to spend special events, and overall appearance. Eighth in residents' connection and engagement with their community. And 10th in overall economic health. But for the good, there's the opportunities to improve page. The 9 categories you see on this slide are where we rank under 200th in survey respondents. Our worst ranking is that we rank 282nd in terms of availability of affordable quality housing. 245th in ease of travel by bicycle and using public transportation instead of driving. 242nd in the quality of our recycling services. We've been raising a lot of eyebrows with that as well. We definitely have. The one possibility that we can think of with that is, if you take city residential trash collection, certainly then you are provided with residential recycling. But if you do not, if you are in an apartment or if you have a commercial enterprise, we do not service that. And so the question is just, what is the quality of recycling services in your community? 232nd for traffic flow in major streets, 224th for cost of living, 212th for ease of travel by car, 209th for overall health and wellness opportunities, and 202nd in the variety of housing options. The final slide up there is simply where we rank first in our comparable communities of our size. I'm not going to read all of those to you. You've heard virtually all of them already in the top 10 lists, but needless to say, we have lost very little ground in this chart from where we were 3 years ago. So as I turn it back over to Eric to sort of wrap things up from the formal presentation standpoint, as I said, this was the first survey that we conducted as a city since 2019, and we know that the world has changed significantly in many ways. I don't know that if you look at a lot of these metrics, they're down a hair or a tick. That really doesn't surprise us because I don't know very many people who say things are better as they're responding to surveys. But it's important that we have a lot of very strong metrics and defined areas that the community has said that are areas to improve upon and to work on. So from here tonight, we have presented this presentation to all of you and are actively working to integrate them into the 2024 budget.
Okay. Thank you. So we've also shared this with our leadership team. We shared it with the community through recent Frank Talks with Franklin Tomorrow, and have shared it that way in a couple different settings through those discussions. This is something we'll also update on our website. We track a lot of these elements in our performance plan around these perceptions, so we'll update to reflect that as well. As we've talked about, we're due to update our strategic plan. This is a great lead-in to that discussion with all of you, both individually and collectively as a board. And then, of course, we will stay on the track of doing this in another couple years to see how we're trending, see areas that we want to may put some additional emphasis on, see how we're doing. As Michael said, there's a lot of positive here. There are some areas where we saw some slippage, and we want to be mindful of that. But overall, still a really strong performance. But we don't want to bypass anything that gives us really meaningful feedback. There's some 2,000 comments from our citizens on a wide variety of things that are on their mind. Those are always valuable too. One of the things I try to do is think about broader trends that we saw in the overall responses, and then how does that line up with some of what got colored in by the comments we heard from folks? Does that help us understand or explain why something went up, why something may have dropped, why something is remaining steady, where are folks' mindset? And sometimes those comments help us with insights on that as well. So we're glad to open it up for other discussion or observations. This will be running through the background of everything we do in the budget, and as we look to work with you on updates of our plans and our priorities throughout all the work we do. So I'll stop there, and glad to open it up for any other discussion, questions, comments, anything else we can help provide you. A lot of the comments we provide to you aren't our analysis. It's what the survey company who does this in 600 plus communities gave us as what stood out to them. So it's both a reflection of their analysis and how we compare to ourselves and to other communities. So I'll turn it over to the board.
Well, the board's thinking about it. The one thing that came to mind is I know we have their strategic plan, and I know we have, 60 metrics we go by?
64?
Have we seen any decline in those metrics in the same time period?
Obviously, the ones that come from the survey. So, like, for example, the management of growth. Otherwise, not as much. The strategic plan metrics are, will ask certain financial questions. How are collections going for sales tax? Tourism visits,
AAA bond rating.
AAA bond
those
rating,
elements, yeah.
response time for firefighters, violent and property crime rates, things like that. With the exception of 2020, where certainly there was economic contraction, but momentary, by and large, no. Those metrics have not significantly, or even to the same degree of a couple percentage point drop, gone down.
got Alderman Brown, then I'll take Alderman Berger after that.
I assume the ones that we mailed out were pretty evenly distributed across the city. Did we do like a heat map of the ones that came back in, where they were in the city? Not necessarily exact addresses, but at least areas of the city. I think that would be relevant to see, especially given, I mean, if you've been living on Franklin Road for the last year, you probably have a very strong opinion about mobility and traffic and construction and all that. But I'd just be curious how it actually heat maps back on the mail.
So we do have the map. I will check with the vendor. So we do have the map of certainly where they all of those data points of where they were mailed out to. But I can try to get that information back.
And I believe they do try to have an equal distribution of what that random selection is, but response is obviously something fluid. One of the things that concerned me is the drop in overall participation in this. And that makes me wonder both in terms of the engagement we saw there, but also how that affected the overall reflection of the community's perception. Because we got fewer people giving us feedback. Sometimes you're more motivated by sharing a negative thought than maybe some other thoughts. I don't know. We did do it later in the year than we've ever done it in the previous iterations. So that's something we'll look at and think about in terms of when we did it. But that's a pretty significant drop. It's half of what it was 6 years ago. And so that really raised some eyebrows for us. And not sure why. I mean, we promoted it exactly the same way we promoted it the previous times, but we'll be thinking and rethinking how we do that to get a better response, both on the randomly selected and the overall, what we call the all-comers that came in. Both of those dropped significantly in this cycle, and timing may have had something to do with it. People's mindset in terms of responding to these types of surveys and outreach may be a little different than it was 3 years ago, but still something that weighs on how we think about these results as well.
Alderman Berger, and then I've got Alderman Baggett.
Can you go to page 17 where you had the survey results? Aside from transportation and traffic related issues, what is the most important challenge, problem facing Franklin today? How do those percentages with managed growth, affordable housing, infrastructure compared to the previous years? Because we're saying 31% here, what about previous years for managed growth? I'd like to know that. You do?
We have that presentation. Hold on.
Good, okay. And I would just mention while you're looking for that, I would like to see in the next survey more questions that actually encompass things like density in housing and density in commercial areas and the mixed use of mixed use communities, which we know that helps lessen traffic and helps lessen a lot of trips outside those areas during the day, somewhat. Actually can be quite great at times, but I'd like to see more questions that we develop that center around density in housing, density in commercial areas, and then maybe something along the lines, I probably could get you some of the questions I'm thinking about, so I don't take up time tonight, but more I'd like to have a question on mixed use as well.
So we have the ability to do about 5, I think.
Yeah, Yes. 5 or
Custom
6,
questions.
yeah.
There's a couple we're sort of locked into because we're trying to rate that over time. So, but we certainly have the opportunity to do 2 or 3 additional questions. So that's really helpful for us because sometimes we struggle with what we want to ask at each given time because we like the consistency on a couple things to see how we're doing over time, but it's good to look at things that might be more emerging issues or questions too.
Yeah,
So
and-
that's really helpful
And
for
one
us.
of those questions, actually, you could talk about density in residential and commercial. You could have some choices there or something that they answer, which could lead into one question and answer both of those.
Yeah, if you have some examples, that'd be great for
Yeah,
us. We'd stow that away.
I could probably write up a few that I would like for you to look at.
Sure.
All right, Michael.
So on the screen, you can see the same set of results from the previous survey in 2019. So to juxtapose, 38% said growth, development, and losing community feel. That would be the comparable to the 31% of managed growth and development in this survey. Housing affordability and availability at 19%. That's comparable to affordable housing at 22%. Transportation, traffic flow, public transit, bike lanes, walkability access, and infrastructure, maintaining roads, sidewalks, neighborhoods, water, combined are 17%. Here, the responses were sort of summarized: infrastructure and roads at 11% in 2022. And then economic health, cost of living, taxes, jobs at 6% would be the comparison to cost of living affordability in this year's survey, which was 10%.
So if you combine that affordability and that housing
Yeah.
affordability,
You're gonna
it was
get-
about 25% in 19, and it's coming in around 32%
Yeah.
in this survey. So that's where we're talking about one example of where we
it's
saw
going
that
up.
be a higher area
Yeah.
of concern or emphasis.
Yep. I would think
Great,
so.
Alderman Baggett.
That actually leads into my
Thank you,
comment,
Michael.
which was kind of how the questions that are affordable housing is kind of worded differently. I feel like affordable / workforce housing is different than affordable. What was the other way? Availability of affordable quality housing. And I think when you think about, and of course, workforce, I mean, I think this has been a kind of like the quintessential problem for housing conversations is I think a majority of people would love to see the availability of more affordable quality housing. Does that tie into, do they want more, by definition, workforce, by definition, affordable? I think it always seems to be conflated. A lot of times is, I have no doubt that there's probably more people that want more affordable housing, more affordable quality housing, and know that our workforce needs housing as well. So I guess I would like to, if that is a takeaway that the city is, which I've heard it mentioned a few times, so I'm guessing that's a takeaway, is that we really need to understand, and I don't know about another survey, but like, I feel like that's a delineation that really really need to get our hands around. Because if you take that and you say, oh, well, that means we need more affordable, subsidized housing. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the community would probably, maybe that's not
And
what
I'm
should
sure
be.
that's what we're saying.
No. I
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
And I know that's not what you're saying.
Yeah,
I'm just
okay.
saying I think that's
Yeah.
what, for us to make decisions, I think it's important for us to know kind of what people are really saying, and because it was kind of said a couple of different ways. But nonetheless, you can still take away that it's a heightened concern for sure. But I think as we make these kinds of decisions, better understanding that delineation would be good.
And that may be an area for a specialized question too down the line as we look at this or some other ways to capture feedback.
It's important to know that this is a tool in your toolbox. It is a survey. You only get as much data as been asked. So to ask the intent of a survey respondent, we may not get that unless you find that 1 or 2 or 5 open-ended responses where they literally come out and say it. But otherwise, it is there for you all to have available to you to know that this is the interests and opinion of the responses.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, sir. And Alderman Baggett, I'm glad that you acknowledged that. That's one of the discussions that we have on the Housing Commission right now is how do we better define affordable housing, workforce housing? How do we actually make sure when we're looking at these surveys, that's the detail that we're talking about? So as we're looking at wordsmithing, and I don't know if this is an option with the vendor, but that is something that maybe we can wordsmith a little bit differently, whether it be that question or maybe it's a question about price of housing. Wherever we can go right there, I know that there are some options, but we definitely need to make sure we can segment those two out.
If I might, if I could, I'm going to put Emily on the spot if she wouldn't come up just a minute, because we're right in the middle of Envision Franklin, and we're getting a lot of community input. And are
Got
there
a survey with that too?
Yeah, I mean, just
Still getting those results.
very, very quickly, my takeaway on the Envision Franklin is housing and transportation. And what's your takeaway quickly from what you're seeing compared to what this citizen survey is saying?
It's actually really consistent. We've seen affordable housing, housing supply, housing diversity all being raised to the top. We've heard a lot about transportation, walkability concerns, biking concerns, as well as traffic. And then we have heard about managed growth and preservation of the city's natural beauty. Those have been the key themes that have been very consistent so far in the surveys and feedback that we've gotten at community meetings.
So maybe as we look to this, as we do the strategic plan, more strategy as far as, I know we're looking at some additional housing strategy and maybe some enhanced strategy as far as growth management. We've been growing like this for 20 years. So maybe people are just recognizing we're growing now, but what are those? How can we say what those tools are other than just words? So y'all ready to keep moving? Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I want to ask maybe just a specific on the 2,800 surveys. They would go to the home and only one person in the home would be able to fill out that survey?
It was a unique link that once you did the survey, it was counted for that residence. Yes.
But one survey per residence.
Per residence.
We sent the vendor purchases the latest address list from the United States Postal Service and cross-references that with our GIS files to ensure that the only respondents are going to come from within the actual city limits of the city of Franklin, not someone who may have a Franklin address.
And you still got 100 back?
We still got 100 back as non-deliverable, return to sender, what have you.
Do you find that unusual, or is that
Not
usual?
from the last, no, that 100 or
usual.
so
It's very
back, 4 to 5% has been what we've averaged in all 3 surveys that we've used this vendor for.
Do you have another comment? Alderman
just
Burke?
real
I'm
quick.
sorry.
I don't.
Just real quick, I would just say, we need to keep in mind with the survey and everything, there are things that we can't control. It's, the cost, the land cost, the cost of living, those things, the desirable place to live. I mean, we created this situation. Congratulations, everybody. We created this, but those are good problems to have. And then diversity is people who choose to live here. So, it's like we can't go out and manufacture diversity. We can't go out and manufacture all these things to put together for land cost and try to manipulate that. Government doesn't control that. Free market does. We live in a free market society, and we always have to remember that. So I just want to put that out there because sometimes we all go, well, let's do this about this. What can we do about this? We wring our hands, and it's like some of the stuff, government doesn't control, government shouldn't control. Just want to say that.
Okay, let's keep moving if we can. The special event permit for Bluegrass Along the Harpeth in downtown Franklin on July the 21st, 22nd. Any
This is
questions about that?
Standard event Friday and Saturday night in downtown, right on the square.
How about Resolution 2023-03, a resolution to adopt a funding policy for the closed pension?
This is something we've worked on with the pension committee, and they're recommending this, and some feedback that we've received that we want to share with you. Christine will walk through it with you, and we do want to vote on this tonight if we can. We have some processes we need to get underway to make inflationary adjustments for retirees, and some updates that will follow guidance that we've received from the state of Tennessee as well. So Christine will walk you through that.
I'm trying to get my.
While she's doing that, thank you, Michael. Good job.
Yes. Thank you, Michael.
Help is coming.
Well, thank you. We just wanted to, thank you. We just wanted to summarize what changes to the closed funding, pension funding policy that the State Department of Treasury is requesting. We, as Eric said, we did go through this with the pension committee at their March meeting, and Chair of the pension committee, Alderman Barnhill, is with us tonight, as well as Mayor Moore is also on the pension committee. He wasn't here for this conversation, but he is aware of the request from the state treasurer. And back in 2014, just to give you some background, that there was a state law passed, the Public Employee Defined Benefit Financial Security Act, which put a lot more oversight for these single employer public pensions on, and delegated that to the state treasurer and his staff. One of the requirements was for a funding policy for these plans, and that was approved by this board back in October of 2014 and filed as it was required to do so. The state every so often does review these plans, and we were sent 2 letters as staff back in December, late December, with actually there were 4 requests. One of them is a request that can be just incorporated at the by our actuary into our actuarial report. It doesn't require any other anything else to be addressed. But there are 3 requests that they want changed in our funding policy. And I want to just walk quickly through these 3. The first is that there's a study going on in the actuarial profession that will have new tables on mortality. Those will be available in the next year or so, and the state does want those tables incorporated into our actuarial reports. This is a best practice for the actuarial profession, and they just want to see that happens statewide in these analysis. We would have done this anyway, but this would go into our funding policy. The second request is something that we have brought to this board a couple of times in recent years. It just hasn't been in our funding policy. We have been in accordance. We have been following the state law that that we, as a single employer public pension, we must have a interest rate earnings assumption that's no greater than 50 basis points higher than what the state Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System sets for that plan. That rate is currently 6.75%. We are at 6.90, and we have a plan that this board approved that it's been declining by 10 basis points, and we'll be at 6.50 here in 4 years. So we are already in accordance with that, but they do want that put into our funding policy. And then finally, the 2014 funding policy established 2 different ways to value the assets for purposes of preparing the actuarial report. It listed 2 methods. One was the actual valuation of assets, and then it gave a second method, which is called the asset smoothing method. And those were both in the funding policies allowable. And the state has requested that we use the asset smoothing method. That is the same method used by the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System. It's been used for many years. It is something that that's widely accepted in the profession, and we are being asked to incorporate that as the only valuation method instead of having 2 different methods allowable in our policy.
Can you explain that?
What would the change would be is that currently we actually have been using that first method, which is the actual valuation of assets. For this closed plan, the asset valuation date is December 31st. And so we would still, of course, value the assets on December 31st. But in the actual valuation method, there is no, the asset smoothing looks at a 5-year average so that you have a little bit more consistency between years. There is a gap. There's a 20% gate so that it won't, if you won't have significant changes, because what happens is when you actually value without doing that smoothing method, you can have significant increases in what those requirements are. And that's something that many years ago there was some concern that your plan would not be well-funded over time if you did a smoothing method. However, many large, well-funded plans have done that for many years. And certainly, you'll have years that you have significant gains in your valuation, and you'll have some years that you don't. And that's what happened for us on 12/31 of 2022. So you won't have big swings in which your required contribution will go down significantly, but you won't have as many big swings and when your required contribution will go up significantly. So the state sees that as a protection that, of course, it's a state requirement that we must fund that required annual contribution as calculated by the actuary. And they're just concerned that a local government, may not be able to fund their funding requirements, or they'll take advantage of the years that it goes down significantly and cut their contribution, maybe incur additional operating expenses that when you go back to more reasonable levels, you would have got yourself in a bind.
So what I hear you're saying, it's like a C, which could be like this, but you're saying the smoothing method sort of keeps it steady and even, so we know what we're doing.
That's the
And then we're
intention of it.
funding.
Yes.
Okay.
So you won't see as much swings in the required contribution. Yes, ma'am. So those are the three significant changes. We also just modernized, added some language that this plan is closed to new participants, and that is now incorporated as well.
Everybody good?
you,
Okay, we'll
Christie.
go on to progress report on Resolution 2022-57, plan of service for annexation of property located at 517 Franklin Road. And while I'm reading the same type of report for 2022-37 for property located east of the intersection of Paytonsville Road.
Yes, both of these annexations happened toward the end of 2022. One was a normal annexation, one was by referendum in December of 2022. The city doesn't have any obligations in terms of the plan of service. They're all developer requirements. So this will be the only time you'll see these progress reports, and there will be a public hearing on May 23rd that will need to be held, but you don't really vote on anything, just as a reminder, but you do hold the public hearing as a state requirement.
Okay. Item 6 is Resolution 2023-20, a resolution declaring that the city will adopt the fourth-year annual action plan for community development block grant funding for the city of Franklin. Kathleen.
Hit your button.
This is just a continuation of our 2020-2025 consolidated plan, sticking with the same activities that we planned: public housing, public facilities, emergency repair, fair housing, outreach. Just moving it forward, and it looks like this year we will receive approximately $368,352.
Good report. Item 7 is, thank you, Kathleen, procurement award to Franklin Disposal LLC of Franklin, Tennessee, in the amount of $3.19 per container per service day for servicing public refuge collection containers located in downtown Franklin for a term award for the Solid Waste Collection Division of the Sanitation Environmental Services Department, Purchasing Office Procurement Solicitation. Wow. Jack, did you write that?
So this is something we've been doing for several years in terms of having a third party help us with those services along with what Jack's team does. And this continues that service and with the same vendor who's been providing the last several years. Anything else to add?
And this is just downtown.
Just downtown.
Just downtown.
Yeah, for those individual containers.
There's about 55 of them, and they empty them daily, clean them when there's.
Okay, item 8 is a procurement award to Securian Life Insurance Company of St. Paul, Minnesota, in the total estimated fee of $208,916.92 for voluntary life insurance and voluntary short-term disability products.
So this
Sarah?
is our benefits team. Sarah Silvis and Tracy Harness work very hard on all this, and give them a quick update on the voluntary program, insurance program.
Yes, so this is something that we offer employees that's strictly a voluntary basis. This is the 5th year with our current vendor, so we are due for an RFP. We had 5 proposals, and we chose Securian. We chose them because they will lower the premium rates for employees, and the benefit is higher with the life insurance. So this will go into effect July 1st.
And this is a voluntary program for our
Yes.
team members.
Yes, voluntary. So it's
The employee
voluntary.
pays.
Employee pays.
Yes,
Yep.
there is no city contribution, and the voluntary products are group term life that they can get in addition to what the city provides, and then short-term disability.
Thank you.
The next 2 are procurement awards to Hawkins Inc. of Roseville, Minnesota for products for the Water Management Department.
This is for water reclamation.
One's for $667,000 and full, blah, blah, blah. Glad you're up here, Michelle.
So this is a procurement award that we've selected for Hawkins. The sodium hypochlorite is just the bleach that we use at the water plant. And then we also clean the odor control at the wastewater plant. And then the sodium hydroxide is caustic, which is our basic solution that we clean the odor control with as well. So our basic operating chemicals that we use, just as part of the process, just rebidding them out every handful of years. These prices have escalated a little bit since our last time we bid this out in 2019. Brian just sent me those numbers, so it's a little bit different than what we planned for. So I'll get with Michael on how to incorporate those changes.
Good. Okay, we're ready to keep moving.
Have those increased since we have the new plant coming online, the quantities?
The quantities haven't increased, the prices have. I'm
The
sorry, I
material
should have
cost
specified
has.
that.
Okay.
The
Material
material
cost.
cost, yeah,
Just
that
wanna
was,
know.
I didn't clarify that very well.
Okey-doke. Item 11, discussion of alternative site analysis for the new city hall.
We have our team coming up. What we want to walk through for you tonight is what we said we would do, which is sort of a generic example of costs at this site and costs at other sites in and around downtown in the area that we've defined, and what that might look like with structured parking, with surface parking, those different elements, and how those roll through different cost comparisons to what we've done in schematic design to this point versus what it might look like with general assumptions on some alternative sites, and then get some guidance from you after we share that information. So, Vernon, you want to kick it off?
Well, thank you, Eric, Mayor and Alderman. Good evening. Glad to be back before you. And in your packets, we included the presentation, and there's a lot of information, but there's only 10 slides, and we've tried to address the various questions that you have asked. So I'd ask your permission and cooperation in letting us work through all the sides so that we can come back to the meat and potatoes of this and get your feedback. Before I jump in, I do want to share 3 points that I'd like you just to think about as we're talking through this. Inflation is real. It was a little bit over a year ago when we came to you with the initial estimate, and part of the 50% schematic design milestone included an update, and that has been included here, and inflation, again, is real. The 50% milestone that you gave us permission to proceed with the schematic design is here today. And that means that without further guidance, either to proceed to 100% or something else, our consultants aren't doing any further work on the design for the building. If we do proceed, the next step, if we stay on this site, would be for our consultant to come back almost immediately and get feedback on the retail space component, and to continue work with our Historic Zoning Commission on the architecture of the building. So please keep those in mind. As far as the presentation, we're going to talk about potential scenarios that we've analyzed and evaluated for the new City Hall. What are the costs, the comparison? What are some of the potential availability of alternative sites? Is the current design that we've worked on thus far transferable? What would be the timeline change if we decide to look at an alternative site? What's the appraised value, we received 2, of the existing City Hall site? And then, of course, what we most are looking forward to is where do we go from here? And hopefully you'll help us with that. So, what are the potential scenarios for the new City Hall? They're potential, and there may be others. First one is stay at the existing site, continue on with the work we've done with our current proposal, which includes subgrade parking. Our existing site with the parking garage equates to about 4 acres, and it has, with the subgrade, we'd have a total of 514 spaces, would be a net gain of 130 on the site. Scenario 2 would be to not include the subgrade parking, which will include some cost in the constructability of the building. We would still use the approximately 4 acres. The City Hall site is 2.88 acres, and the parking garage a little over 1 acre. We'd utilize the 314 spaces in the existing parking garage, which would be a net loss of about 70 spaces given the footprint of the new building. We've talked with this scenario about potentially leasing other spaces near downtown. Harpeth Square, we know, has space available based on a recent analysis that was done for available off-street parking spaces. Discussion to be thought about in the future. Scenario 3 would be an alternative site with structured parking. We'd still need 2+ acres for City Hall building, but we'd also need another acre or so for the structured parking. And you'll see what that cost would look like. And then the 4th scenario would be an alternative site with surface parking. And we need about, again, the 2+ acres for a City Hall footprint, but another 3 acres to surface park about 300 vehicles. So we'll go on to the second piece, and Joel will share some of the costs associated with those 3 scenarios. And again, we'll come back to them at this chart at the end.
All right. Thank you, Vernon. Joe Marlowe, City of Franklin Engineering Department, and I'm gonna talk about the costs. So what are the costs in related to our current project as well as the alternative sites? And the answer really is, it's complicated. What we have before us is the cost of our site, recently updated in the last 2 weeks since we were last deferred. We've got the new update, as well as then we're taking that information, we're extrapolating it out 4, 5, 6, 7 years into the future, applying it to hypothetical sites with hypothetical constraints. So our takeaway of this as we kind of go towards the future here is we're really looking at big picture. Is it a significant savings or not? And stepping through this, let's take a look at it. I've highlighted the top there. We're going to go through the 4 different scenarios that Vernon mentioned. As he mentioned, none of these scenarios include retail. We've taken that out of the equation, keeping it simple, straightforward, apples to apples. The only things that we're changing are the site itself and the parking arrangement. Scenario 1 is what we have right now, and we have the 2 costs associated with that, the costs that were based on the January 2022 data, and then our updated costs, the April 2023 data, reflecting historic inflation from this last year. Then scenario 2 is what Vernon discussed as well. We remove the subgrade parking, we decouple those 2 projects. Then scenario 3 is now when we go to an alternative site, and we build a structured parking above ground instead of below ground. I'll note that our site, City Hall function, requires 300 spaces. So scenario 1, we're actually going to have 500 spaces. Scenario 2, if we don't build a garage, we still have our existing Second Avenue garage. We still have our 300 spaces. Scenario 3, building a 300 space vertical. And then scenario 4, if we spread those 300 spaces out, it takes about 3 acres. That's roughly the size of this City Hall site. Remove the mall building and you surface parked it. That's about 3 acres for 300 spaces. Those are our 4 different scenarios. So then on the left is what I'm using with air quotes, our known costs. And these are the same buckets that we've seen before, the building, the garage, the excavation. The only added elements, and if you can see my laser pointer, we added a row for due diligence, because if we go off-site, we're going to need to do some kind of due diligence, geotechnical survey, perhaps environmental study, basic architectural layout of the site to see if our buildings fit. The other thing that we've changed on this is our inflation contingency. Our old numbers, we were running with 3% per year. We're upping that some. The construction inflation over the past year, 2022, was a historic inflation. It was 13% in the construction industry. Looking forward, the next year is definitely lower. We spiked, but it's still in the 5 to 6%, then going to 4 to 5% theoretically, and then hitting back to normal. We're staying with 3.5%. We're talking long range. This is going through the end of the project as well. We're going to be constructing throughout that. We want to be conservative, but not overly conservative. So that's the number that we're staying with right now. This gives us our total known costs. To that, then, we add our unknown project costs. This is the buying and selling of land and the difference in that, as well as, and it's in red there, on-site and off-site improvements. And I'm going to highlight those. For this site right here, we know what our on-site and off-site improvements are, and there's really not much. There's a 8-inch water line in 3rd Avenue. We got to upgrade that to a 12-inch line. Then we got to resurface 3rd Avenue. Not much. As we go to other sites, they could be more significant. They could not be. But some of the things to consider would be, if we're on a project with floodplain, would be floodplain mitigation. Other things could be off-site street improvements based on a TIA. We know that some of the properties that Kelly's going to show likely require some significant off-site street improvements, and those would need to be taken into account as we go forward. There could also be significant off-site water and sewer improvements. Again, we mentioned we got an upgraded an 8-inch line here in 3rd Avenue. Other sites, especially those with larger perimeters, with larger streets and larger utilities, are likely going to have larger improvements needed. And lastly, we could have off-site downstream stormwater improvements. We're fortunate here on this site. We're close to the river. When it rains, we don't usually get a lot of flooding right here. The rest of Central Franklin is not so fortunate. That's why we're doing the Church Street Drainage Project. There could be costs associated with that if we go elsewhere. I highlight these just because they might not be a whole lot, but they could be significant on the order of a few $1 million. So we won't know until we look at each specific site. So you take the known costs, you add the unknown costs, and you get the total project costs. And then the last line here is our parameters and some assumptions. The top line is years of inflationary costs. Our base scenario is still 4 years. It's probably a little bit less than that now. If we go to scenario 2, get rid of the garage, add a year of design, we're going to say 5 years. Scenarios 3 and 4, where we go off-site, buying and selling property is a little more complex. Vernon's going to outline that quite a bit, but we're saying about 7 years. And the reason those are important, obviously, is inflation. When you take our building costs and garage costs, put that at about 3% inflation, you're getting roughly $3 million a year for inflation costs. So for our base project, it's 4 years. 4 years times $3 million a year, roughly $12 million. And you can see in that grayed out area, we're at 11.4. So roughly $3 million a year. The next two lines are the parking spaces. All of them result in a net positive parking on the site, except for option 2, where we can still park our city hall, but we lose 70 spaces in downtown Franklin unless alternative means is found. All right, diving into scenario 1. This is our base project again. And as I mentioned, we now have 2 costs. We have our old costs that now look so good, and now we have our April 2023 costs, which have increased. And as I mentioned, construction inflation is 13%. The number here is actually higher than that, but it's because we're not quite apples to apples, and I'm going to walk through what that is. Our base cost, originally we did not have any streetscape, urban parks, or green roof. In our new updated costs, we're building the park on Church Street side. We also have some additional rooftop outdoor space. So that's about $3 million there. We are also now basing our project on the 3.5 million inflation and not the 3 million. So that's 3% instead of 3.5%. And so that's an increase there. So our new project cost is 99.3 million for our base project, the city hall, parking, and now our park. There are no unknown project costs. We know what we have, so our total project costs are 99.3 million. If we go to scenario 2, we decouple the parking garage from the project. We start walking through some of this. We see we saved 2.8 million on the excavation of the site. We don't have to go down now. And I'm going to jump to the next red number, which is the parking garage itself. We save 8.7 million not building the parking garage. So those two numbers, 2.8 plus 8.7, is a net $11.5 million savings if we don't build the underground parking. There is a slight increase in the building costs. Our underground parking garage has 200 spaces. It also has some usable space. We have 92,000 square feet above the parking garage. We also have some space in the parking garage storage, a stormwater lab, some muddy boots areas, some mechanical buildings elements. Some of those elements would need to be carried up if we don't have a garage, so we're carrying a factor for that. The rest of this works out through the math, and you see that the total known costs are saved about $9 to $10 million if we get rid of our garage. Now we go off-site to scenario 3. That top line with that due diligence, we're adding, we're going to say $200,000. We now save on demolition. That's somebody else's problem now to tear down this building. We save on the excavation again because now we're going up with the 300 space garage instead of down. We have a little bit more building costs. That's the same. Our parking garage costs goes up slightly. Now the cost per space of building an above ground garage is much less than a below ground garage. But now we're building 300 spaces versus 200 spaces. We're building 50% more spaces. Our costs go slightly up. And I'm going to do a footnote that this cost is based on the most cost-effective garage we can build, which is a precast concrete garage, which is right here what we got on 2nd Avenue. That requires a lot of caulk. It develops a lot of interior water features as you go along through the years. If we wanted to build a more robust garage like they did on Harpeth Square, that number would go up even higher. We walk through those here. The next one that I want to show us the difference is the inflation. Again, now we're 3 years different. 3 years times roughly $3 million a year is $9 million. However, we save on our temporary relocation. Now we don't have to move temporarily, save $2.5 million. However, there's likely a net increase of cost on the site between 6 and 7 million. Again, likely because, not likely, is because we have a 300 space garage and inflation. Those two numbers would likely be an increase. However, that would be offset between the buying and selling of land. Those are the next unknowns. We could potentially make some money there. However, that would be tempered with whatever on-site and off-site improvements we need to do. Then going down to scenario 4, now we take that structured parking, we spread it out. You see we save both on the excavation of the site as well as the parking number. The remainder of these are pretty much the same. We would save between 2 and 3 million, potentially more through the purchase and selling of land, again, tempered by on-site and off-site improvements. I'll let Kelly walk through this. Here's that.
All
Sorry,
right,
hang
thank
on,
you,
hang on.
Joe.
I just lost it.
Thank you, Joe. The next question is, where are potential alternative sites that could accommodate the programmatic needs for City Hall? And potential sites are shown on the screen based on the criteria that was endorsed by BOMA at a previous work session. The first criterion is that the site would be located within or near downtown Franklin. And for this exercise, we use 3/4 of a mile. Which is shown in the light gray circle on the screen. In this geographic area, if we start with the yellow star, which is at the center of the public square, and we go north, that takes us up Hillsborough Road to Independence Plaza, and you can see that by the yellow star, and that site's in red. North up Franklin Road to the factory at Franklin, shown in lilac. East to Eddy Lane to a mix of light industrial properties shown in brown. South down Columbia Avenue to the H.G. Hill site in Carter's Court. And west to Fifth Avenue South and Mount Hope Street shown in brown and blue. The second criterion is that the lot size is 2 acres or more, and as Joe and Vernon mentioned, the total amount of acreage is dependent on the type of parking that's ultimately provided. The third criterion is that the property is zoned for commercial and institutional uses. And for this exercise, we excluded properties that were not likely to change, including cemeteries, city parks, school-related properties. The fourth criterion is that the site can accommodate about 100,000 square feet of building and about 300 parking spaces. But to really fully vet this criterion, due diligence and preliminary site design would be needed to determine whether any of the individual sites could really accommodate the programmatic needs for City Hall. And that could take place after we publicly advertise for letters of interest from property owners who may be interested in selling their land. Right now, this map shows potential alternative sites, not necessarily what's available or for sale. So from an overall perspective, some of the sites have redevelopment or development potential, and others may have adaptive reuse potential, while others may not. The zoning varies across the geographic area and is context-based and determines the building and site design for the site, and has dimensional standards that create the overall building height, the overall setback height for buildings from the street. And not all sites are equally viable for development. For example, what you see in the black circles allow up to 3 stories in building height. And in these black circles, in some of the surrounding districts, it allows up to 2 stories. And other properties have floodplain and floodway constraints. So not all are equal in terms of what the full development capacity is, which is why it's important that we take a deeper dive on any of the individual sites that might be considered should we pursue this direction, because each site presents its own characteristics, but also its own unique set of challenges depending on the size of the property, the location of the property, the shape of the property, what lies below the ground, as Joe mentioned, and then what types of improvements would be required for development.
Excuse me, Kelly, pardon the interruption. As you were doing the circles there, I noticed that our PowerPoint doesn't have those indications. Can we get those slides? Or
Yes, the animation helps highlight where they are. When they're all overlaid, it's a jumble of black circles, but we can
get you the
provide-
PowerPoint version of this
Yes,
so that you can see
yes.
that. Good.
All right. I'm going to speak to, is the current design transferable? We've heard the question. All right.
Keep going.
Okay. We've heard from the BOMA, is the current design transferable? Can we take it with us to an alternative site? And again, the answer is kind of, what we've done is we basically put 2 buckets together about what likely can be transferred to another site and what likely would require redesign. So I'll walk through these quickly for us here. 1, the space needs, that all that work that's been done, talking about the number of departments we have, the number of people in each department we have, the space needed for all those people, all that work can likely be transferred. And then 2, the programming, what's in all those different departments, the adjacencies to other departments, all that work can be transferred, as well as the space standards themselves, kind of the Lego building blocks of our building. All that work can certainly be transferred. Elements that likely must be redesigned, the massing and the elevations. We are not designing a prototype here. We have a specific building in a specific location in a specific town, and that is here on prominent historic public square, where we're fronting public square. We have lining up with the courthouse. We're transitioning from 3 stories to 2 stories as we approach Church Street and the residential. Those unique parameters are not likely to be found anywhere else really in Franklin. So those would likely need to be redesigned in some form or fashion. Obviously, the site layout is very specific to this site. Anywhere we go, that site work would need to be changed. And lastly, the floor plans themselves are not likely to be transferred to another site. We're not designing a prototype, but even when we do design a prototype, like our fire hall, we found that as we go to other sites, something always needs to be tweaked. We're redesigning something in one form or fashion or the other. And I'm going to say, coming from the private consulting world, designing a prototype was our bread and butter. That was the holy grail, because then we're just printing money as we can take that elsewhere. But we always got a paper jam because something ended up happening where we had to redesign that. And a simple example would be, as you can see on the screen there, our access. Our access for our 3-story building is off a public square. That's what those red arrows are. If we go anywhere else, we're not going to likely have a public square. Our access will probably be from the public sidewalk in front. If we have a parking garage in back, we might have a secondary access in back. Think police department headquarters. That in of itself is going to require a complete redesign of that first floor, and will have ripple effects as you go to the floors above. And as Kelly mentioned, this is assuming we have a 3-story building where we can go, and it's not zoned for 2-story. If it's zoned for 2 stories, that becomes all the more complicated and requiring a redesign.
And how tall is the police station?
I don't know.
It's a 2-story building.
But it's got, does it have the garage under too?
It's in the back.
In the
It's
back.
it's not the building, it's not underneath the building, it's in the back with a subsurface, 1-level subsurface.
Not really underground.
No, no,
It's at grade.
yeah.
I'm going to jump in now, and before I get into what the timeline change would look like if we decide to look at alternative sites, please know that our charge here is to try to build a very efficient building in a very timely manner. And we're at a point with schematic design that if we go forward, we would start with our team, start value engineering the building and looking critically at the different components of that building and see where we can make savings. However, if we look at alternative sites, we really got to start over. And we started in February 2020, and it's taken us 3.2 years to get to this point today, 50% schematic design. If we decide to look at alternative sites and put out requests for letters of interest to see who would be interested in selling us their property and affording us the opportunity to do some due diligence, we would take a few months, couple months to do that, again, as quickly as we can. But also, it would take us essentially 3.2 years to get back to this point in time where we had anticipated a move-in date in the spring of 2027. We'd be looking at a move-in date somewhere around 2030. And likely, if we look at alternative site, put out a request for proposals for new consultants too, and whether the same one is successful in being awarded a new contract that is yet to be determined. I also want to talk about the appraisals we received too. You've recently been advised of those. We had Boozer and Company, they're a local company. And we also had CBRE, they're in the greater Nashville area. Their two proposals are a little bit different from the land cost on this building. We gave them specific direction to look at the land only of these 2.88 acres that this building's going to be removed. So don't even value the building. We had them look at the parking structure and then the theater next door. We're following up with them, but in totality, they came up pretty close with the same figure of a little over 16.5 million or so. But when you looked at this site, they were a bit different in their comparables. And again, we're going to follow up with them. So where do we go from here? And, option one is focus on our existing site with or without the surface parking. And we can work with our consultant to update our professional services agreement to take into account. We can look into leasing some off-site space for our employees to park in, and that's an option. Option two is look at an alternative site with or without a structured parking. But the decision is yours, and hopefully we'll get some of that direction this evening forthcoming. I do want to go back to the costs, because obviously there's a lot of assumptions made there, and Eric wanted to bring this full circle.
Yeah. This is high level. These are high level numbers. The cost and time to deliver the project has a real impact. It ripples through here. We have uncertainty and unknown elements related to, if we look at alternative sites, what we sell this for, what we have to buy the other property for. So those are unknowns right there. Joe spoke of also on-site and off-site improvements that may be drivers in those specific projects, be they road network improvements, water lines, those kind of things. We know that here. We don't know that at other sites, but we know they could be significant. I think the the thing that I would say to think about is you've got a pretty close cost element of the building itself. You're building a 93,000 square foot building, and then you've got however you deal with parking. So you don't, and some of the savings that you might realize at alternative sites, you largely chew up a significant chunk of that with the 3 years it's going to take to do the design and planning elements that get you to the stage we're at today. That's just where we are. And I think when you look at that, I think what I would say to consider is how much you want to use that time. Does this help you? Do you need other information to help flush this out? It's our best estimates with what we know with a generic scenario at a site. But I think you see it's not necessarily a huge cost savings in terms of at least the construction or development of the facility itself. And I think where we would like to see is what guidance you need. If you want to have some time to think about it, what guidance you can give us tonight. If you want to return to this in 2 weeks after you've had some time to think about it. And if there's other information we provide, we can certainly provide room for that as well. But I think you look at this and you clearly see it's an expensive facility. It's expensive wherever we build it. And at least in terms of the cost to deliver the project, there's not a significant change. Your probably least expensive opportunity is to forego the subgrade parking. To color that in a little more, one of the things that occurred to us is we've done a recent downtown parking study, and it showed significant underutilization of the parking spaces at Harpeth Square. At least 200 spaces are available there every day, all the time. So we could look at an arrangement there that allows you to use those spaces for our employees or whatever that is for at least a period of time. And as Joe used the term, you're sort of decoupling the parking garage project that had been in the capital investment from the City Hall project. So you're probably still going to need to look at a parking facility somewhere in the future, but you may be able to push it out 10, 15 years because you've got spaces that you could lease and use there for some purpose that helps you avoid a $10, $11 million cost in the City Hall project. And it is an extremely expensive way to build that parking because it's part of the platform for the development of City Hall. And it's just a more expensive way to deliver the spaces, although you can make a case that you're using the space that you have more efficiently by both providing parking and the City Hall facility. So those are just some thoughts as you look at it. Love your feedback on where you want to go and what you need to help make a decision. The two broad options involve us going into a more detailed, involved process to refine what alternative sites are. And I think the question for you is that going to be worth it? That's a little bit of a crystal ball question, but is it going to be worth it in terms of the delay and the potential costs associated with that and what those sites might bring in terms of complexity, challenge, whatever else that might be?
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Peterson.
it had not occurred to me until, I was looking at this, that it would not be possible to use the design that has already been looked at. Why is that?
Well,
They said something about.
we can go
not
back to that
having-
slide.
Yeah, not having.
Might help.
It said not having the entrance on the square, but other than that.
Let's go back to that. There's a variety of things because each site has certain parameters, but Joe can kind of walk through that again.
Yeah, I'd really like to hear about that.
Yeah. So there's actually likely several reasons why we wouldn't be able to use the exact same plan. One of which just by changing your access. If we had the floor, this doesn't show the actual floor plan itself.
Yeah.
But when your main entrances are in different locations, your offices are in different locations. Your main, again, so right now our main entrance would be where the arrows are off of the square. If we go somewhere else, where we don't have a square, we would likely enter from a different location. We'd probably enter from the main sidewalk that would be out front. That in of itself is going to change your floor plan, the layout of where all the rooms are, the layout of the hallways and all that, as well as this one there might be a potential entrance from the back. My point is that's going to end up changing all your layout, your plans, and that's going to have ripple effects because you have stairs and elevators based on where the public and staff zones are as you go up the building. That's one reason. There's also where the utilities come into play. There's grading. Our site here is very flat.
Right.
If we go to
Grading.
another site, it's likely to have some of the sites we're considering are not very flat. So now maybe you're talking about a daylighted basement. I mean, there's all kinds of things that happen that could create a change. My point is I've tried to do this in my past, try to use the same one, and there's just always something like that grabs you, and you just can't quite reuse the same building like you thought. Like I said, our fire department's case in point. There's always been something that had to change with them as we've gone forward.
So yeah, that's a great example. When we did Fire Station 6, we said, this is our new prototype. We're going to build every fire station just like this. And a lot of that has been true, but each project has had significant modifications because of the site. And that happened at Fire Station 7, Fire Station 8. So that's just an example where you can have that intent and you may get some elements of benefit, but the site always drives certain things you have to do to make it work the best for our operations.
And so I also realized you were saying that the main entrances would just be off the sidewalk. So we're really talking about a building right up to the sidewalk, even though it's not?
Not necessarily, but that's...
Well, that's what was
yeah,
being said
yeah.
to me, I thought.
But I would suggest that as Kelly went through those examples of potential sites, until we have solicited interest from
That's
property
true.
owners,
Mhm.
then we can't do the needed due diligence, either from an environmental standpoint or from a perspective design standpoint.
And you were saying that might be
And how you're parking it.
a couple of months or something?
Yeah. it would
To,
like-
to get some letters of interest?
Right.
Is that it?
Well, what we would do that in typical process in procuring real estate, we would put out a request for interest. And then we would receive those requests, evaluate them, talk to you about it, and then enter into some type of an agreement that would allow us to enter the property and do due diligence. At the same time, we would procure the assistant from a design firm to look at how the building would set on that property, so then we can look at the on-site and off-site impacts of what would be needed. And whether, we're in an area that allows for 2-story or 3-story comes into play and gets to your question as well of how the building is laid out on the site as well. So it would take longer than 2 months.
But you're
takes
saying that
several months.
maybe the 2 months would be for people to send in a letter of interest.
And get back with you and talk about which ones we want to pursue, some type of an arrangement that allows us to do our due diligence. That's typical of any development process.
Sure. And the other thing is, there are places where even in the, close to downtown, I mean, in the 3/4 of a mile, there are several of them that only have 2-story buildings. Where's that?
Along Columbia Avenue is one of them,
Let's
if
go
you
to
want to
that.
pull up the map. The buildings facing Columbia Avenue have a maximum building height of 2 stories, but, for example, the H.G. Hill property allows for 3 behind that row of first buildings due to the topography that goes down away from the street. Carter's Court is the same way down Columbia. First Avenue South is another one. Really, those 3 circles show the locations where building height maximum is at 2 stories. And that's context-based on what's surrounding it and what the expected design intent is for the area.
And you have some floodplain shown there.
Yes.
Why not take that off? That is ridiculous to think about building this into the floodplain. I'm sorry.
There are serious considerations for developing a public building in the floodplain, and at this point, we just showed all of the properties. That would be part of the due diligence and considerations that we would need to consider in terms of safety and public access.
Well, I would certainly say take that off, period.
I've got the vice mayor, and then I'll take you, Alderman Baggett.
I'm not sure if you don't know which site is the favorable site. I don't see how you know where the entrance is to the building. So therefore, when you say that the doors don't match up, or the entrance doesn't match up because it's facing this way or it's facing this way, until you get your information on which building site or whatever it is, you don't know which way it faces. And unless I'm mistaken, maybe I just thought it, we asked for an appraisal on the H.G. Hill property. And we are tying up the garage out here. Are you planning on trying to sell the garage too? And I guess we bought the land from First Tennessee Bank, right? Did we do that?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Okay, well, what I'm getting to is this. When we built the garage out there, when the city built the garage, the city leased the land from First Tennessee Bank.
Oh, we own that land. Yeah.
Okay, you own.
Yeah,
when
we
did
own that.
do
We
that?
own what the garage is on. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So we do that. But there's never been any discussion that I know of about including the garage. And I don't understand how an appraiser can come out and puts $11 million on this property and then goes to this property over here and puts 4. But to balance those out, the next appraiser comes over and he puts 11 over here and 4 on this one. That's an amazing summary that we've got there that says it's $16,300,000 appraisal, and it's within a few dollars of being each one of them. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But the garage should never have been included in the appraisal to begin with. It's not something that's going anyplace, is it?
It's part of the site. We wanted to know the value, but that's why we also did it separately. I mean, that's why it's a specific, separate element. And, the individual or the entity that may be interested in this property may be interested in owning that garage, or they may not. You may be interested in continuing doing that garage, or you may not. So it helps you understand what your options might look like by knowing the value of this whole block and what you own.
So what is the value of the garage?
Depends on which
$5 million
appraisal
or
you look
$11
at.
million?
Yes, right.
Okay, so what is the value of the garage?
Pick a number. Use asset smoothing.
Yeah, possibly.
You've got.
That's as good a technique as any.
One appraiser said 7 million, the other one 11.7. But the question that we ask ourselves, can we rebuild a structure like that, and what's the cost? We still have to. We don't know what we could purchase land for and where it would be.
And you'd no longer be able to build just a straight parking garage.
True.
You'd have to wrap it and do some other things that we require from a design standpoint now that we didn't when that was built many years ago.
Yeah, okay, so I mean, that's kind of where I am on that. But I don't think we make a decision until we know what the value of the property is that we potentially are looking at. I'm not going to go down here someplace and go 200 feet up the road over there on Church Street and try to build this building there because it does the same function if it's here or if it's there. All I'm trying to do is to make sure that we're getting the best value for the money out of if we went up to the H.G. Hill property, the best value for the money. First off, I disagree with the philosophy that the City Hall is the mega driving engine for downtown, because I don't think it is. It may have been 30, 40, 50 years ago. It may have been that. It may have been what attracted downtown. But City Hall doesn't attract downtown now. You go online too much for the permits and stuff that you're doing. I wanted to look at that up there. We're still not in any position to look at that up there. We've looked at this, and we've looked at alternative sites, and I guess there's a half a dozen of those. You could have ruled out probably 2/3 of those because there wasn't enough property in those sites to make it feasible to put City Hall there. And as far as where we are on the schematics and the fact that this building doesn't sit on another site or whatever, and I gotta be honest with you, I don't necessarily see that. You do, that's fine, but I don't necessarily see that. what I see is that we've gotten so far into this right here that it will make it extremely difficult to make a legitimately financial decision if we want to go someplace else. Let me ask you this. If we just wanted to purchase and not sell this location, where are we? Are we anywhere on that? Are we? I mean, I don't think I've necessarily proposed swapping the two properties or anywhere. I mean, I think this area right here could be developed into a fantastic development for downtown that would attract tourism, attract people, would be a pleasant place to come to from people who are visiting downtown Franklin. I don't see City Hall being that. I don't, but that's neither here nor there. And that's, we never got to that. We never looked at that. I've said 2 or 3 times, take what you want to do here. We've got $2-point-something other million in sidewalks. We want to do $500,000 per block from 1st to 5th. Look at what you're looking at here. If you can do the parking, and if you pull 200 city cars out of here and 50 city vehicles, 200 employee vehicles, you're going to free up. We always talk about how much we're freeing up. Are we not freeing up 200 plus parking spaces if city employees don't come to this location? Are we? Anyone?
Of course, but you're going to have to build parking wherever you put it in. Yeah, you're going to still be building parking somewhere.
You're going to be building parking somewhere, but you're going to be building it where it's not as inconvenient to come to downtown Franklin. And we don't know what the parking situation is going to be in 10 or 15 years because we're projecting an unbelievable amount of growth in Franklin, Williamson County. And the growth that's going to occur in Franklin probably potentially goes on the left-hand side of Columbia Avenue southbound. Because you've got all the old buildings there that a lot of them are not even being used now anyway. So where did your growth go?
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up if you don't mind, Vice Mayor, because I need to go to, and we've got limited time. So I'm going to get Alderman Baggett, and then we'll try and Alderman Brown after that.
Once again, we've got a massive, I know we're tight on time, but we've got a massive decision and we're squeezed. And I know, but we need a special work session. And I know we've talked about that, but this is very important. And I hate to limit our discussion on this. Remember the number one concern on the nice presentation we had on the citizen survey was managed growth and development. And if you ask the downtown people and people who visit here, frankly, the overcrowdedness of our downtown is a real thing as well. And so thinking about this as an alternative commercial development needs to be weighed with the fact that this is a big site and it would cause a massive amount of growth and development, which may not be palatable for the citizens. At least it's not in the survey we just described or listened to being described. It all comes down to whether or not if you can put this building somewhere or whatever. This spreadsheet breaks it down for us because we're going to have to build a building. And whether it looks like the one that we've seen or whether it looks like something else, that's all fine. Can this go there or this go? It doesn't really matter. The cost have been outlined for us. And so whether or not we enter from the sidewalk or whether or not there's a subgrade, like we're making a financial decision. And the financials are right here in front of us, except for some very serious things that basically make or break the decision, which is we have in my opinion, a lousy appraisal. I mean, it just makes no sense. I literally will buy the city hall for $4 million right now. And so will everyone else up here. Like, it's just not even in the realm of reality. I mean, I will find the help. I'll ask Alderman Barnhill. He'll sign for it. But it's just not even in the realm of reality. And I know you all did your due diligence and you put it out and you get it back and it is what it is. And I appreciate that. But I think we have to also realize that's just not even in the ballpark. And so that hurts with the decision-making process. It also does hurt, to Alderman Barnhill's point, is we don't know what the cost of other properties would be. But the delta between what we would sell this for and what we would buy something else for is a factor. But I think at the end of the day, bottom line is, if we just stay where we're at, we're going to have to value engineer the heck out of what we got right now to make the financials work. I mean, to be honest, because it's gone up significantly. So we've got even bigger challenges, in my opinion, to make this work, even though looking at these alternative sites. And I understand. I mean, I do not really, I think it would be so short-sighted of us, last comment, because you're wanting guidance. I think it would be very short-sighted of us if we stayed here. If that was the ultimate decision, it would be very short-sighted for us to not build underground parking. I think.
All right, we need to keep moving, because I've got Alderman Berger wants to say something too, and
We need a special
we're crunched
session
for
for
time.
this.
Well, I
We need a
agree with
special
you. We
session
need,
for this.
we
This
need
is-
more conversation on this.
We've heard 4 or 5, 10 minutes of other folks, and we need to all be able to speak.
I agree. Alderman Brown.
I have, the numbers are going to be what the numbers are, and they're, you can see the trajectory of where they're headed. There's not going to be a huge delta here. I really don't believe that's going to be the case. I'm going to continue the path of, I think we just need to stay where we are. We need to continue with our plan. We've spent a lot of time and money talking about trying to move it. I've agreed with doing some due diligence, but for reasons that are not just financial, I believe City Hall ought to stay where it is. And I believe right now this is our best plan for moving it forward. And I think more time and money wasted, it's not going to end up saving us at the end of the day. And so I'm for moving forward.
Alderman Berger.
Real quick, I think I'm with you, Matt, on this, because we've got enough information that I think if we continue, we're just going to go down a rabbit hole more and more and more. And it's going to cost us an arm and a leg. And it's going to cost us, 2007, 2008, we were headed towards a deal for City Hall. Downturn came, we had to negate that whole thing. We had to throw it out the window. It wasn't going to happen. Our big problem is we've waited 15 years to get back on track. And I think that's one of, if I could say one thing, I think city has made, and including all of us, we're all at fault for waiting so long. Because costs are going to continue to go up. It's never going to be any cheaper, because it's an expensive project. We talk about crowding, overcrowding, Main Street. You know, that's what we want. I'm sorry, but that's what we want. If not, then our Main Street, we don't maintain or survive or prosper our Main Street and our merchants if we do not overcrowd our city. And the thing is, and don't take that the wrong way, that's not a negative, that is a positive. And the other thing is, I think if we look at this and go, wow, you know, this site has so much potential. But I'll leave you with one last thought. City Hall, we are a city hall that's extremely active. There are people in this place all the time. Every street festival we have, this place is jammed. Every activity we have, every time our city streets are shut down outside, this place is a buzz. This is the center of our activity. I'm looking at these numbers, I'm going, this doesn't make any difference to me. It's not enough. It's not enough. If we were talking 20, 30, $40 million difference, we were talking some more essentials with the numbers. I might give it a second thought, but I'm ready to move on. Thanks.
I'm going to get the last comment. Deja vu, police department. Same scenario we went through. So we'll be back in about 10 minutes, and
If there's anything else you all need from an informational standpoint,